This is Coach Parry Auto-Suggest. Today, we're going to be answering some of the most common questions that runners ask on the internet. And today, we're talking about how often do runners? The first one that people ask is, plain and simple, how often do runners run?
How often do runners run? Well, how long is a piece of string? So you get runners that go on run streaks where they have to run at least 1 mile every day. And so you'll get runners that literally run every day for years on end. You get runners who run once a week just to really stay healthy and get out there and do sort of a park run. So there really is a very broad band. I think the more relevant question is, how often should runners run? And for the vast majority of the human population, running 3 to 4 days a week is enough running to achieve almost all your goals, and you'll be far better suited doing some running and mixing that up with strength training and cross training. So get out there for health and performance. 3 to 4 days a week is enough running.
Now that you know how often runners run, let's take a look at the next most common asked question, is how often do runners need new shoes?
As runners, we like to buy new shoes. We love having new shoes. We like having new running shoes, but they are expensive. So how long do they last for? Well, that kind of depends a little bit on what sort of type of runner you are and how light or heavy you are possibly. But generally the rule of thumb is between about 400 to 500 miles for the general road shoe. If you're using racing flats, then possibly about 300 miles will be about the limit of those because they're lighter shoes and they won't last as long. And carbon plate shoes are really expensive, but you're only going to get about 100 miles, maybe 150 miles out of those. So you want to be very wary about how often you use those. And a lot of people just use those for racing and maybe some sharp end training. So how do you know that your shoes are done, are finished? You can't run in them anymore. Well, with carbon plated shoes, it's going to be obvious because actually they're quite flimsy shoes. So after you've done a certain amount of racing or marathons, they're just going to literally fall to pieces probably on you. With road shoes and your training shoes, they're going to be a wee bit different. They will last longer, certainly. But again, they might wear out. You might start to go through them in the front and your toes and your sides. Certainly for myself, I always go through the side of them. But also you might start to have more achy joints and stuff as well. So if you're sort of aching through the body a little bit after a long run, then perhaps that's a good time to get those shoes changed.
Another very common question that runners ask is, how often do runners fall? Shona, what have you got for us?
How often do runners fall? Well, that's an interesting question. We don't actually have great amounts of data on that, and I think it depends on things like, whether it's on road or trail. There's so many different factors, but it is a great question essentially because, it's a risk. You don't want to get injured while you're running. So let's just talk about some of the strategies to prevent that. So if you're running in winter, you want to make sure that you have the right set of shoes so that you're not slipping and sliding everywhere over the ice or the wetness. If you're running on trail, again, the type of shoe is really, really key. And slow down if you don't know the routes. Make sure that you're really taking it easy. And especially if you're like me and not very confident on the trails, you want to make sure that you really know where you're putting each foot. And then on road, obviously there's a little less risk there, but you are running up and down onto pavements and so on. And so make sure that you watch your step, don't sort of go too fast and land up falling anyways. There is also a risk of falling as we get older. Our neural pathways are degenerating. They're the first things to go, the neural pathway to your extremities. And so we really want to make sure that we don't fall as we're running. And then what really helps this is that you keep going with your strength training, because that is going to stop or minimize the risk of falls. And of course, just make you a stronger and better runner as well. The good news is we've put together a free strength training plan for you that you can do at home. If you're interested in downloading that, you can click on the link on screen now.
So the next most common question runners ask, how often do runners poop themselves? Devlin, take it away.
You got to be kidding me, right? Nope, I'm not answering this one.
You such a spoil sport, Devlin. Next one is, how often do runners lose toenails? It's almost a bit of a badge of honor, isn't it? Shona, what do you got for us?
The dreaded black toenail question. I've lost many toenails over the years. Again, this will be a variable sort of thing, different person to person, and very much dependent on the shoes that you are wearing and how you wear your shoes. So if you're running very long races, in terms of ultras and marathons, chances are you're going to probably lose a toenail or two or get a black toenail or two. And so the key thing here is that you want to make sure that your shoe fitting is correct. So don't buy shoes that are too small for you. And the general rule of thumb there is that if you wear a certain shoe size, your running shoe size should be one bigger than that. So you want to be able to put your whole thumb if you bring your foot or your heel all the way back into the shoe, you want to be able to put your whole thumb between your big toe and the front of the shoe. And same thing, if you push your foot all the way forward in that shoe, you want to be able to slide a finger at the back of your heel in that shoe. Your foot must be able to move around. And again, this is a bit of a Goldilocks situation. It mustn't move around too much because then you take the risk of blisters and so on. So just make sure that your shoe has big enough sort of space in the front in that toe cap so that when you are running, it's not hitting the front. Your toes are not hitting the front of the shoe constantly, because that's essentially how black toenails and losing toenails happens.
And let's take a look at another one. How often do runners get injured? Another fantastic question. Let's dig into this one.
Injury incidence in runners varies greatly. There's been loads of research done, and the papers come back showing between 37 and 52% of runners get injured annually. So really, to unpack that a little bit, what causes injuries? Injuries are caused when we overdo it. So that means that we either push too hard too soon, or we are overloading and doing too much volume, and then we pick up overuse injuries. So the best way to avoid injury is to train sensibly, to build up slowly, make sure that the volume you're doing is appropriate for the level that you are at, and to incorporate some form of cross training, and in particular strength training, to help make sure that you are in the 48 to 70% of runners who do not get injured on an annual basis.
So as Lindsay mentioned, one of the things you can do to stop yourself getting injured is strength training. And truthfully, if you're not doing these three things as part of your training regime, you're definitely going to pick up injuries more often than not.